Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the APO Productivity Talk on a global standard for responsible AI management system. My name is Lee Dongjin, the program officer in APO Secretariat. The Productivity Talk is a series of online discussions where we explore emerging trends, best practices, and cutting-edge innovations that enhance productivity across industries. Have you ever noticed how artificial intelligence seems to be everywhere now? From the moment we check the weather on a smart speaker, to scrolling through social media, to that just one more episode Netflix recommendations, AI quietly shapes so many parts of our daily life. It's guiding our navigation apps, personalizing what we see online, even helping businesses optimize logistics, forecast demand, and serve customers faster. AI has truly become an invisible driver of productivity enhancement in almost every sector. But here's the thing, while AI's potential for boosting efficiency and innovation is enormous, its development is moving at lightning speed, faster than most organizations or even governments can adopt. So alongside these productivity gains come growing questions about biases, fairness, privacy, and accountability. If AI is going to continue enhancing how we live and work, we need to make sure it does so responsibly. And that's exactly why we are here today. The agenda is about something that's shaping the next phase of both AI transformation and productivity improvement, the world's first international standard for managing AI responsibly, ISO 42001 Artificial Intelligence Management System, or AIMS. Now, that may sound technical, but at its heart, it's about one simple idea: helping organizations use AI safely, ethically, and effectively to drive real productivity gains. To make sure AI works for people and for sustainable value creation, not just automation for its own sake, think of it as a structured playbook, a way for any organization, big or small, developer or user, to plan or implement, monitor, and continuously improve how AI is applied in your operations. Just like ISO 9001 gave us universal language for equality, and ISO 27001 set the standard for information security, ISO 42001 now gives us a framework for trustworthy and productive and responsible AI. Why does that matter, and what are core concepts of AIMS, and how to implement it, and what will be the benefit of it? You can get answers today. So with that, welcome to P-Talk on a global standard for responsible AI management system. Let us explore how this new framework can help us unlock the next generation of sustainable productivity and trusted AI innovation. So pleasure to introduce the speakers today, Mr. Fernando, Managing Director, CANDA Consulting in Hong Kong, and Ms. Antonina Burlachenko, Head of Quality and Regulatory Consulting, Star Global Consulting in Poland. Mr. Carr is an over 20-year risk management professional with expertise in AI risk governance, serving as both a consulting partner and non-executive board director. And Mr. Carr is currently Managing Director of CANDA Consulting and co-chair of the Responsible AI Committee at AI Association in Hong Kong. He specializes in designing pragmatic AI governance and enterprise risk framework. Also, he specializes at translating complex AI and risk concepts into actionable strategies that align with international standards, including ISO 42001 and regional guidance frameworks. And Ms. Antonina is an experienced leader in technical and regulatory teams, over 15 years of hands-on experience in regulated software development projects. She has a deep understanding of quality assurance, project and product management processes, and software development frameworks, and AI system life cycles. She has a thorough knowledge of global regulatory landscape for medical devices. So how are you, Mr. Carr and Miss Antonina today?
Good. Thank you for having us today.
Very well. Thank you, DJ.
And we are really happy to have both of you with us today, and we are excited to hear your insight on PTalk on a global standard for responsible AI management systems. First, Mr. Carr will kick things off with the why, the need for the global standard, helping us understand why responsible AI matters and why a unified management framework is so important. Then Ms. Antonina will take us through what, core concept of the ISO 42001, giving us a clear picture of the standard structure and key requirement. And finally, she will wrap up with the how, implementation and benefit, sharing some practical ways organizations can adopt the standard and the real value it can bring. So, Mr. Carr, if you're ready, please show us and share your insight.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, DJ, and thank you everyone for joining us today and your interest in responsible AI management systems. I want to start with an analogy for us. When racing teams set up a car with harnesses, a roll cage, neck bracing, helmets, and fire retardant suits and gloves, like you can see in this picture, they aren't slowing the car down. In fact, they give the driver confidence to go faster to try and win the race. Discussions on responsible AI, AI governance, and AI management systems, they often elicit misconceptions that we might create overheads or create speed humps to slow down innovation and adoption. We are going to suggest that it's the opposite, and I challenge you to think about it another way too. The adoption of AI, it's going to bring about a lot of potential and promise, that's for sure. But with it also comes a variety of challenges to work through, including risks. So you'll be hearing from Antonina a little bit later to explain the components of an AI management system, specifically ISO 42001, as DJ mentioned, and you'll hear about implementation. My job is to speak a little bit about the AI landscape, the opportunities and challenges it brings for organizations, and why an AI management system is necessary and fundamental for your AI strategy and responsible AI adoption. So we will demonstrate that the value of an AI management system, just like the safety systems in racing cars, they're going to allow you to go faster and safer. I'll give you some specifics on how that comes to life a little bit later. You can build trust and confidence with an AI management system, not only internally, which is going to allow you to innovate with AI, but you also signal this externally, which can be a differentiator for your organization. Finally, you can scale AI across your operations because an AI management system provides repeatability. And ISO 42001 is a globally applicable and valid framework. So there's a true compelling argument to consider 42001 implementation. Let's explore the AI landscape first to set the context for what makes a management system so valuable. First, let's look at some of these rapid advancements in the landscape. So AI capability is continuing to advance at a rapid pace. The advancements in these individual technologies and modes is not only moving fast, but there is now convergence across models. And models are exhibiting multimodal capabilities. Longer and longer context windows allow models to reason over larger data sources. And we now also have agentic AI expanding the enterprise use case and productivity potential. Non-technical staff can now use AI without needing a data science or a coding background. And we have much better understanding of how to prompt large language models as model providers now share more and more guidance. This is unlocking scale for all users to leverage AI. So much so McKinsey pulled forward their prediction for when 50% of all work activities could be automated. They now predict this will take place between 2030 and 2060, so that's a midpoint of 2045. That's a full decade earlier than their previous prediction. AI capabilities are no longer the bottleneck for productivity. Instead, it's your organization's ability to adopt and deploy. Speaking of adoption, use case development and adoption is also accelerating. So beyond the traditional machine learning, deep learning, and advanced analytics techniques, we now have generative AI and co-pilots, adding a further 40 to 70% value in potential productivity gain, estimated by McKinsey's study. That's $2.6 to $4.4 trillion globally. Stanford's latest annual AI index report shows that 78% of organizations used AI in at least one department in the last year. That is up from 55% the year prior. So we know that Gen AI and co-pilots are driving this acceleration in adoption. Lastly, governance requirements are also advancing rapidly. Guidance, standards, and laws that have built upon the OECD's AI ethical principles have now been published globally. This isn't exhaustive, of course, just some examples for you. So you had Singapore's generative AI framework that's been around, Australia's voluntary safety standard, and there's Hong Kong guidance on the ethical development and use of AI, just to name a few. We're also seeing the rapid passing of AI-specific laws. The most well-known, perhaps, is the EU AI Act. But here in our region, there's also Vietnam's Digital Technology Industry Law that was just passed this year. And in South Korea, the AI Basic Act that's going to come into effect in 2026. And we're also aware of things like state-based laws across the US, amongst many other examples. Right in the middle there, you can see standards, such as ISO 42001. And there's also frameworks, such as NIST's AI Risk Management Framework. And these seek to address the challenges and opportunities with a structured and strategic approach in a manner that is principally consistent across the globe. Of course, we're not saying that they solve 100% of your compliance requirements. There's no such thing. You need to pay attention to local market, industry, and AI use case nuance. There's no such thing as a silver bullet or a panacea, but these standards are purposefully designed to be agnostic and applicable across all markets, and they'll get you a long way there. So what are some of the benefits and opportunities that AI is bringing to enterprise productivity? I've got no doubt that some of you are interested in this. If we zoom in further and look at the details of a McKinsey study predicting that 50% of work could be automated, this can be broken down into very specific value pools and use cases. So in this graph, they identify that as a portion of the functional spend on AI, the bang for buck could be in 4 value pools: customer operations, marketing and sales, software engineering, and research and development. Now, other studies may find value in other departments, of course. This is just one study, but we thought that we'd share some examples with you. So let's explore these. Customer operations. For self-service, we're all familiar now with chatbots providing human-like, personalized responses in real time. Consultant support is where AI is helping with more complex matters. So an AI support tool is providing content, including customer information, to a human consultant who is interacting with a customer. For feedback and training, AI is sharing notes and training tips immediately after each customer interaction. For marketing and sales, AI is being used in strategization. So AI enables a richer gathering of unstructured market trends and customer insight from news, social media, customer feedback. For consideration, where AI individualizes access to product information. Recommendations and virtual try-ons of products are also now something being used. For retention, using AI for personalized communication, rewards, proactive interactions, embracing human-like qualities through chatbots again. Under software engineering, in inception and planning, using AI to help with analysis, cleaning and labeling of large data sets. For system design, AI is being used to enable more efficient iteration and versions of architecture design and configuration. And for coding, we now know that capabilities match and in most cases surpass human capabilities in coding. There are other examples also like testing and maintenance, which can also further productivity gains. In research and development, for early research, AI allows for gathering of insight across large volumes of data sources, enhancing ideation and product exploration. For virtual design, enabling more rapid and higher volume of iteration and testing at a lower cost. And for simulations, AI helps to optimize the simulation and testing phases in research and development, reducing time and cost. Now, the real reason why I've shared these examples with you is actually to illustrate the huge potential with AI adoption, but also that the variety brings about a lot of nuance and detail that needs to be considered. Just think about the amount of processes, tasks, jobs, and activities these examples alone impact. Just one or two are going to require significant change management, project management, risk and IT support, training and governance, etc. So unlocking the value and being able to scale AI adoption across multiple use cases and future capabilities that are yet to come will require an enterprise and strategic approach with your existing management system. Now, it's one thing to know that there are opportunities to leverage AI for productivity and other gains for, but it's another thing knowing that your strategy for adoption and implementation of AI will vary widely based on a variety of parameters. These are all unique to every organization. This could be summed up as context, and we've broken this down into internal and external context. Again, not intending to be exhaustive here, just to illustrate some examples for you. So internally, you'll want to start thinking about your infrastructure and operational readiness. Where will your models run? Is it on premises? Is it sovereign cloud? Do you have secure data pipes? What about role-based access and logging? Do you have model evaluation, monitoring, and testing processes already? For your workforce and operating model, do you have the right roles and skills? Have you got accountabilities for AI model ownership and governance? How will you manage technical capability needs? What are the training plans for your board, executive, and staff? How do you manage use case development, triage, and ideation internally? And then externally, we already touched on policy and regulatory landscape. So emerging AI and governance requirements. What about the market and vendor ecosystem? How do you manage and consider vendor lock-in and model substitution? What type of assurance and third-party management governance do you have? You've got to think about your environmental and sustainability considerations also, your local requirements, the commitments that your organization has made. What about impacts on reporting? And finally, have you thought about all of your stakeholders? Have you mapped them? And have you thought about who might be impacted or interested in your AI use? There's lots to consider here again, and it's just an illustration of the importance of having a structured and strategic management approach that supports with working through these various issues. Now, let's look at some of the risks and challenges identified by numerous studies on AI deployment. In a recent IBM survey of 2,000 companies, they identified data quality as a risk and challenge. They basically found that poor data quality leads to imprecise or substandard outputs that require rework, additional oversight, and quality checking. Data inaccuracy also leads to mistrust, and staff may eventually abandon tools. This jeopardizes your return on investment. Hallucination leads to reputation risks if staff aren't trained on it, and reputation risks can grow if enterprise AI is customer-facing. In a McKinsey study looking at unlocking AI potential, they found leadership misalignment, where staff are using AI 3 times more than what leaders expect. And they're already ready for AI adoption, but they found that leaders are not steering fast enough. 40% of leaders say adoption is too slow. They're citing skills, resources, and complex approval processes as reasons. And only 1% in this study say that AI rollout is mature, meaning mostly there's no impact on employee workflows, increases inefficiency, nor enhancing operations. In MIT study on the Gen AI divide, they found that there are some brittle workflows that don't support the structural changes that are necessary for AI adoption. Enterprise-level integration is somewhat flawed, and so partnering with AI vendors instead of relying on internal development succeeds more often. And change management and executive leadership buy-in are lacking, and significantly this hampers AI deployment. So all of these risks and challenges have a direct link, again, to what an AI management system is attempting to address. So let me leave you with what an AI management system will deliver. You'll be able to move from pilot to production. An AI management system gives you a repeatable and consistent life cycle that reduces ambiguity. So when you have clear accountabilities and processes for approval or decision gates, you can speed up proposals, proofs of concept, and pilots. This is what encourages innovation. You can deploy safely and faster. So with a repeatable process and a framework for considering your AI use cases, you can build in guardrails, policies, and controls. This will alleviate bottlenecks and even fast-track innovation by removing rework and expediting approvals and decisions. Just like our car racing analogy, the addition of safety measures allows you to increase speed. You can unlock data with confidence. Speed and confidence also comes with a standardized and uniform approach with your data. So when the organization and AI teams have governance over data, this unlocks the potential for AI use cases and innovation. An AI management system emphasizes security, intellectual property, privacy, and consent safeguards. So this increases your confidence to explore AI possibilities. You can also make ROI measurable. So it's a management system, right? Now, you know what they say, you can't manage what you don't measure. In an effective AI management system, it requires objectives, KPIs, monitoring, and continuous improvement. So leaders are then much better equipped to prioritize and dial up effective use cases, or dial down, reject, or retire low-value uses. And this helps to maximize real productivity gains. And finally, an AI management system builds trust that accelerates value. ISO 42001 is an internationally recognized framework, and it signals trust. It allows organizations to tangibly demonstrate due diligence and prudent management of AI. This gives organizations a point of differentiation. By demonstrating trustworthiness, there is real value in a build once and comply globally approach. So with that, and without further ado, let's dive into what ISO 42001 is with Antonina.
Thank you, Carl. I'm sharing my screen now. So Carl told us why AI governance is important and how organizations could benefit from implementing those compliance frameworks for AI. My task today is to tell you a little bit more about aspects of AI management and also give you some instructions maybe or share experience on how it's better to approach implementation of this kind of systems. And before I start, I just want to give you a brief overview of ISO 42001, which is the first AI management system standard out there. So the standard was published not so long time ago, just in the end of 2023, and it describes a framework which organizations could implement to follow responsible AI practices. And the standard is intended to be implemented by the organizations not only developing AI solutions, but also the ones which are using ready AI solutions. Besides that, it is industry agnostic, so no matter in which domain or industry your organization works, the standard still will be beneficial for you if you are dealing with AI. So the idea with this standard is that it is not supposed to replace the existing management system structures such as quality management systems or information security management systems. The idea is that you have to implement them into existing structure, integrate into existing processes, and it will augment those processes with aspects specific to AI technology. What's important to know about the standard also is that it has a harmonized structure. So if you have information security management system compliant with ISO 27001 or quality management system compliant with 901, it will be easy for you to integrate into that management system. Just to highlight, also the standard in itself is not a foolproof recipe to make sure that specific AI is compliant, but it is a framework of processes which allows you to maximize the quality of your output and also benefit in many other aspects, such as building a brand which basically triggers more trust, not only from regulators, but also from users. So ISO 42001 standard has a certification model, so you can also get certified to it so that independent organization can come to you, audit you for compliance, and then issue you with a certificate of compliance with the standard. So if you look at the overall standard framework, there is an organization which performs in an outer world. So you have some external context in the organization which influences you and sets you some requirements and inputs. And then you have your internal organization context, which is also taking as an input and shapes your processes, procedures, and the way how you organize your operations. The organization itself, central role of this management system standard takes leadership. So leadership's role is to ensure that the framework is implemented in the organization, that it is functioning properly, that there are roles and responsibilities and accountability framework defined. And then the standard also covers different other aspects of management systems, such as planning and support, operations and execution, then performance evaluation and continuous improvement cycle. And obviously, once we place our product on the market, we monitor how it performs, and we also continuously gather this feedback loop, which serves us as an input, and we can use it as some data for potential improvement. So this is like an overview of AI management system. And if you worked with other management systems, you will recognize that it fits very well in the same framework. So if you look at the structure of the standard, we've discussed already that it covers the context of the organization, leadership role, and it covers different aspects of the system lifecycle, like planning, support, operations, and then continuous performance evaluation and improvement. What's important to highlight here about the standard structure is that there are those annexes A and Annex B in the standard, which are normative annexes, which means that those annexes are basically part of the requirements of the standard. So in Annex A, it lists a number of different control objectives and controls, which allow you to prepare basically so-called statement of applicability with the standard, where you define which areas of AI management are applicable to you, which are not, and then also describe all your internal processes on how you control different risks in your organization. And then Annex B is also extremely useful because it gives you implementation guidance. So for different controls from Annex A, Annex B would give you more practical instructions, or maybe different aspects which has to be taken into account and covered as part of the controls. And then there are Annex C and D, which are informative, which means they are not part of the requirements, they are just for your information, but they still are quite useful, especially Annex C, which gives you some AI-related organizational objectives and risk sources. So how we will approach this talk today, we will speak about the requirements of the standard briefly, and then in the end we will discuss potential approach to implementation, so that you have something practical and pragmatic to move further with. So if we had to look at the AI management system in one slide, that would be this slide. Here I tried to capture key processes and key basically policies which has to be covered by AI management system. So first of all, you have to establish AI policies. Those AI policies could be AI policies related to the development of AI-based products, but also AI policies for AI use in your organization. Then you have to establish your AI objectives. So what are your key objectives related to AI as a technology? And then how will you make sure that you implement those objectives throughout your different processes, operations, and product lifecycle? You have to define the organization context, internal and external. We will speak about it more, but this is also one of the cornerstone aspects of AI management systems, because it allows you to prioritize properly and scope properly your management system. You have to plan the resources for your AI management system. You have to conduct risk assessment and AI impact assessment to understand how you as an organization may affect different stakeholders, such as your users, society, or environment even. And then if you develop your own AI management, AI systems or AI products, how do you cover those AI system lifecycle? How do you control it and make sure that it is, as Carol highlighted, it is a repeatable process and you can achieve high quality results again and again. And then what are the data management practices in the organization? Because all of us know that data is one of the core components to successful AI products. And then on top of it, we also have different aspects related to communication. So how do we inform interested parties on our policies, on our intended use of the system which we develop? How do we monitor and communicate with our users post-market? How do we report any incidents and other reportable events to the regulators? And how do we ensure that we take into account AI system use, not only for with our products, where we have to inform our deployers and users about how it is supposed to be used and what are the limitations, but also how do we make sure that all AI systems which we are using in our organizations are being used according to their intended use and are not misused in any way. Sorry for that. So now let's speak a little bit about the organization context. So as previously mentioned, organization context has to be analyzed and taken into account when we start building AI management system. So an organization context, part of it is internal context, but part of it is external, and different aspects has to be taken into account. So the first aspect here is legal and regulatory. Which legal requirements are applicable to us? What regulatory requirements are applicable to us? In which markets do we operate now? And also importantly, what is our further scaling plan, long-term goal to go into other markets? Then we have to take into account the intended purpose of the AI systems which we develop, the domain within which we operate, as well as also analyzing and taking into account this intended purpose of the systems which we are using. Do we have any contractual obligations, either external ones or potentially internal ones? Which norms and ethics do we apply from the perspective of AI, and how do we want to reinforce it in our organization? How do we define roles in the organization? What is the governance framework, accountability framework? Is it clear for everyone in the organization how they impact the quality of the product which we deliver? And then we have, obviously with AI, you know how rapidly it develops. So taking into account the competitive landscape, being continuously on top of the trends in the technology and in your industry, and also cross-industrial trends as well, is very important. And then analyzing who are the interested parties or key stakeholders involved in your organization's operations, and what are their needs and objectives, because part of what AI management systems do, they are allowing us to make sure that we meet those objectives and needs of our key interested parties. And based on all of that, we have to define our AI objectives and AI policy in the organization. So speaking of AI policy, what does the standard tell us about AI policy? So first of all, when we set up AI policy as leadership in the organization, we have to make sure that we establish along with it a framework for setting AI objectives. We have to make sure that it includes key principles and guides all AI-related activities in the organization, either development or use. It should include commitment to continuously meet regulatory requirements applicable to your organization, as well as a commitment for continuous improvement. And obviously, it should be available as a documented information, and it should be also aligned with your organizational purpose and business objectives and overall strategic direction. And it should be aligned with all other policies in the organization so that you don't have any contradictions or misalignments. And then the very crucial and important aspect with AI policy is that you have to communicate it within your organization to make sure that each person in your team knows how they impact the quality, and other aspects of AI being developed or being used by your company. The next step is to also define AI objectives. So there are different AI objectives which you can come up with. Those are some examples which are mentioned by ISO standards related to AI. So what's important to mention here is that some of those objectives are maybe a little bit kind of contradicting to each other or being a little bit of a trade-offs. So let's just talk through them, and then I'll give you an example of how different objectives may be basically trade-offs where you would have to consciously select one of them over another. So with accountability framework and accountability objectives, your objective would be to set up this framework of responsibilities, accountabilities in the organization, and how the decisions are being made and act upon. With AI expertise, you may have an objective to build expertise in a specific AI technology, or be competitive in a specific area and build trustworthy products. With data quality objectives, your focus would be on the quality of data as a core component of robust, high-performing AI systems. With fairness, you would try to address the issues of bias and making sure that you are not discriminating towards specific subgroups of your users. With maintainability objectives, you would address potentially needs of multiple stakeholders, which would allow you to ensure that your system is able to change in the external environment, and the cost of the maintenance is also acceptable. Then privacy-related aspects could be again overlapping with existing information security management systems. But here you would have to take into account data privacy, because a lot of AI technology is based on data, and you have to take into account privacy of the objects or users who could be part of the data. And then robustness of your systems could be an objective, and robustness is basically an ability of your system to maintain its performance in the unexpected external environments and inputs. And then last but not least, a very important aspect is transparency and explainability of AI system aspects as means to build trust from your users and from also regulators. And now you remember I mentioned that some of those objectives, you cannot go for all. Like you have to, at some point, you have to prioritize. So for example, high-performing AI systems may be complex, but complex AI systems may be less transparent. So you cannot get both. You cannot get very high transparency and explainability, and at the same time have very at some cases you can, obviously, but in many cases you cannot have both. You have to select, either have very high performance system or have it very clear, explainable, and transparent. So that's why it's very important to take into account a specific use case and specific domain you are operating in, and decide on which objectives are important for your organization. Another crucial aspect of AI management systems is risk management. In many management system standards, including AI management, we are supposed to adopt this so-called risk approach, which means that we have to prioritize the importance of different assets and impact of those assets, and then address those risks based on their impact and severity. So AI management system standard requires us to implement risk management system, establish the processes, and have all the documented information about that in the organization. It also instructs us that the organization has to decide on the risk appetite, again, depending on the context, depending on the domain in which you operate. And then risk management system has to take into account the internal and external context of the organization, the intended purpose of the systems we develop and use, the potential sources of risks and then events and risk criteria, and also potential consequences for the organization, individual, and society. And in some markets, we already have regulations published, and sometimes those regulations also instruct us to take other impacts into account, such as impacts on the environment, on the critical infrastructure, and other kinds of impacts. Besides that, the standard requires us to conduct so-called risk-benefit analysis, so that when we develop our system, the very last step of risk management before we release it would be to assess what are the benefits of our systems comparing to the risks which we introduce by placing it on the market. And obviously, benefits should always overweight the risks introduced by the system. So, but speaking overall of the risk management framework, the approach here is quite standard. We start with risk identification, where we try to identify different risks and things which could be off. And risk identification would be from the perspective of the intended use of our AI system, but also potential misuses, potential errors in use, and other unexpected uses. After that, we have to estimate the risk and evaluate are those acceptable or not. And then we would have to come up with risk treatment measures or mitigation steps and assign responsible people for each of those. And after that, we implement those risk treatment measures and start monitoring the effectiveness of risk mitigation and continuous risk governance in the organization. So what are some machine learning specific risks which is worth to take into account when we conduct risk assessment for AI? Some of those risks relate to transparency and explainability. We briefly touched upon it speaking of AI objectives, but here in the risk management, from the risk management perspective, it's important to take into account that the transparency and explainability are ways to build trust among your users. So it's important to take into account those risks and come up with some mitigation and risk control measures so that you address this risk, which could potentially, be harmful to your business. Another important risk to take into account is potential high complexity or uncertainty of the environment in which your AI system might have to operate. So if we look at an example of self-driving cars, those cars operate in extremely complex environments because there are different outside environment conditions like weather, lightning, and many other, which has to be taken into account to ensure that those AI-based systems are safe for the environment and people around. And obviously, this high complexity is not always that complex as with self-driving cars for many other AI applications, but still we have to take this into account when assessing risks. The next category of risks are related to data quality. So here we have to take into account different aspects of data-related aspects, such as how representative is our data, have we taken into account aspects of bias, and then what is the risk of our data being poisoned. So the next chunk of risks are related to model training itself. So how do we mitigate the potential overfitting or underfitting of the model? So overfitting is when our model memorizes the data and is not able to generalize and perform well in production, and underfitting as an opposite of that, when our data is just did not successfully capture the dependency. Model didn't successfully capture the dependency of the data. And there are other risks related to availability of memory, compute resources, network, and all of that. Risks related to the adequacy of the verification and validation activities, because the domain is still quite new. All the risks related to cybersecurity, because nowadays we see every 2 weeks we see new and new case studies where AI was somehow exploited by adversarial attacks, and it is important risk to consider and make sure that we take some actions to secure our products. And then all other risks related to the post-market and deployment phase, how the deployment itself could affect the performance of the model, and then the risks related to use of the system, how our users will perceive the system, and potential risks for this automation bias, where our users might over-rely on the technology. What's new about AI management systems that it's require us to come up with so-called AI impact assessment. And I hear a lot of questions like, what's the difference between risk management and AI system impact assessment? So the key difference is basically in what we are trying to address. Risk management is about identifying specific risks or things which could go wrong, and ways to address those as mitigation, while impact assessment is more use case and user-centric, where we assess how our system will potentially affect our end users and environment and society overall. So those two concepts are definitely very close to each other, and quite often we start with AI system impact assessment, and then it could feed into a risk management process. So from the perspective of AI system impact assessment, what we have to take into account, we have to take into account failures and misuse of AI systems. We have to provide our potential users with the high-level description of AI systems, deployment environment, key features, algorithms, and data. We could provide high-level information about the interested parties and how our AI system might benefit or harm different interested parties. And then we also can highlight intended uses and unintended uses of our system. So quite often AI system impact assessment could be a document which you could share outside of your organization, while typically you do not do it with risk file. And this slide comes from ISO 42005, which introduces to us AI system risk impact assessment and compares it with risk management. So as you see, overall in the organization, you build your AI management system, and then you define your organizational objectives, as we've discussed. And then you may have your risk management process and risk identification on the organizational level, where you try to identify what are the risks and opportunities related to AI overall in your organization. But then if you develop your specific AI product, AI system, then for that specific AI product, you will also conduct risk assessment and identify risks related to it. And you would also conduct impact assessment, and you would assess how that specific product will impact individuals, society, overall. So this is like a snapshot on to just highlight the difference between this impact assessment and a risk management process. So as we've mentioned previously a couple of times, one of the cornerstone documents of your AI management system, compliant with ISO 42001, is this statement of applicability. Statement of applicability is a document which is based on this Annex A of the standard that addresses different areas and risk controls in the organization. And it provides also an information on which areas and controls are applicable with justification or not applicable with justification to your organization. So if some specific area is applicable, you would also explain which processes of standard operating procedures you've implemented in your organization to address those specific risks and controls. So let's have a brief look at different areas and controls as per Annex A. So first of all, it's policies related to AI. So as we discussed previously, here we would have to show which policies related to AI we have implemented and how those policies align with our overall organizational policies and goals. After that, the next one is internal organization. So here you reflect on your framework, overall governance framework in the organization, roles and responsibilities, and then also a framework for concerns reporting. So to demonstrate that you not only define the responsibilities and roles in the organization, but also ways to provide a feedback in a safe way so that your employees can give you some feedback and report any concerns. The next one is related to resources for AI systems. So here we take into account and document all different processes related to data, tooling, resources. So what is our data governance practices? What is our tool validation process and resources? How do we select tools needed for our AI system lifecycle? And then human resources. So how do we ensure that our people in different roles are competent for the duties they perform, and then also they are aware of the management systems and processes and expectations from them. And then there could be other resources such as different systems or compute resources or other physical resources needed for development and successful maintenance of the AI management system. The next controls are related to AI system impact assessment. So here we have documented processes for AI system impact assessment, execution, and ways to assess the impact on individuals, groups, and society. And then if we develop our own systems, then we have to document the AI system lifecycle. We have to make sure that end-to-end ML pipeline or lifecycle is covered, and we control those processes. The next one relates to data. So all the stages of data governance, starting with data acquisition, provenance, through data quality control, pre-processing, and all further steps. The next control is information for interested parties. So how do we communicate to different stakeholders? How do we communicate on the incidents, providing supporting information? What are our processes for reporting, and all aspects related to this area. Use of AI systems is related to the intended use and the policies and processes for responsible use of AI, and defining the objectives for use, the ways how we use the system, and the ways how we make sure that we use AI systems according to the original intended use. And then third-party relationships take into account all the processes where we control our suppliers, where we establish processes for staying in contact and getting information from our customers. So all those third-party relationship processes are going into this area and control. And then on top of it, as an organization, you may come up with some specific controls and also document it as part of your statement of applicability. So standard does not limit you if you have any ways to improve the way how you manage your AI. I'm showing this slide because if you are an organization who develops AI systems, then it's important for you to know that you have to control this AI system lifecycle from the very start till the very end, especially if you operate in some highly regulated domains, such as medical devices or other safety or critical areas. So the very first step of your AI system lifecycle is inception, where you define the overall task which your system will solve, and you take into account such as different aspects such as bias, the need and reasons for using AI to solve these specific tasks and stuff like that. And then throughout this AI system lifecycle and ML pipeline, you have to document such processes as data management with all aspects of it, the process of modeling, feature engineering, selecting of the proper algorithm. So all of that has to be documented as a procedure. And then also for a specific product, you have to capture the record of what happened, how your decision-making process went, what was your justification and logic for different decision being made. And then approach to verification and validation, evaluation of the model, deployment process, continuous monitoring, optimization, and operation in production. And throughout this life cycle, you have to make sure that you, on every step of this process, you build in it risk management practices, security and data privacy practices. You make sure to take into account bias-related controls, and then transparency, accountability, and explainability processes. For the sake of today, we cannot go deeply in each and every area of ML pipeline, but I wanted to zoom in and look just at data management process. So you know that data is a crucial aspect of machine learning based products, and the quality of the product itself will heavily depend on the quality of data which you use for training it. And as such, ML technology depends heavily on the data, because by providing a big amount of input data with expected results or labels, you are able to capture some dependencies or patterns in that data, and that's exactly the core of machine learning. So speaking back of the data lifecycle process, key aspects which has to be taken into account are proper requirements definition for your data, collection and acquisition process, then version control and provenance of the not only data but also metadata connected to it, all the different ways how you pre-process or change your data, such as potential duplicates removal or any other steps you do with data. It all has to be documented and captured in the documentation. And then data labeling process and annotation, data splitting, sampling, and all processes related to data retention and disposal. And this is quite complex because you have to make sure that you follow all the relevant data privacy regulations relevant for your regions. The last aspect of AI management system is continuous monitoring of the processes which we established, and then improvement. From the perspective of monitoring, we have to define which processes we monitor, and again here we apply this risk-based approach, and then we also define how do we measure and what are the KPIs or criteria for us to know that something is off. We have to conduct internal audits, and again here we apply this risk-based approach because we define on the scope and areas to be audited depending on the needs, risks, previous outcomes of the audits, but this is one of the ways for us to see how we perform and what are the potential areas of non-conformities or improvement. One of the responsibilities of top management in the organization is to conduct regular management system reviews and to assess how effective is our current management system, is our AI policies continuously suitable or not, are we still aligned, and how well we progress in achieving our AI objectives. And this is like all the data feeds into our continuous improvement process. So we identify any potential areas for improvement, and we continuously improve and proceed with this implementation, monitoring, and further steps of the continuous improvement process. And if we identify any nonconformities, we have to address those. We have to address the immediate nonconformity, but also find the root cause of it and address the root cause by applying corrective actions. So those are the key concepts of how this continuous improvement cycle in the organizations AI management system work. So we had a look at the snapshot of requirements of AI management system. Now I would like to switch a little bit into what to do with it, how to approach it, because like it has a lot of different areas. But what would be the practical framework and practical steps you could take to implement it simply? So the first step, what I would suggest you to do, is to define your organization context and the scope of AI management system. If you have a big organization, it might make sense to limit your initial AIMS to some smaller scope, maybe one project, one department, so something a little bit more manageable than full-blown AI management system in a big organization. After that, you will have to define your AI policy and objectives. So again, sometimes starting small makes sense because it allows you to be more in control and more confident with what you've done, and then proceed with the next areas. After that, you have to conduct AI impact assessment and risk assessment. So it allows you to identify key assets related to AI which you want to protect, and key opportunities you want to pursue, and then how your system might impact your end users and other stakeholders. After that, you would draw up this statement of applicability, as we discussed previously, which has different areas and different controls. You would link it back to your impact assessment and risk assessment, and you would basically justify which areas are relevant for your organization and why, and which processes are already in your organization that could address some aspects of AI controls. And then that statement of applicability would be a good roadmap for you to see what other areas or processes are a little bit lacking or has to be improved. And the next step would be to basically document and implement all those missing procedures or processes to cover the remaining risk controls based on the priorities and impact. And after you implemented those processes, you would switch into monitoring and improvement mode, but as well scaling further. If you started with limited scope of your AI management system, you would basically, after completing this first initial implementation cycle, you would be more comfortable to scale it in other projects, domains, or departments of the organization. So this is like a framework which is quite practical and might be helpful for you if you decide to go for this implementation journey of AI management system. And then just to provide you with an information of how this ISO certification works, as I previously mentioned, ISO 42001 is AI management system, and you can be compliant with it, and even just stating that you are compliant with the AI management system is already a strong signal to your users about your trustworthiness and then responsible approach to AI. But if you want to go a step further, you can go for the certification and the ISO 42001. And this certification cycle for the standard looks like this. You start with the initial certification audit, which is typically would be stage 1 and stage 2 audit in the first year. So during this initial certification audit, certification organization would assess, review all your processes and see if they are compliant with the standard. They would also look at your implementation records as an evidence that you follow this system. And then they would issue a certificate of compliance. And then you would this certificate of compliance would is valid for 3 years max, and every year you would have a surveillance audit where a certification organization would come and check if you still have you still follow your management system and you still have all the records that you are following it. So after year 2 surveillance audit and year 3 surveillance audit, your basically 3-year period would end, and then you would go into again recertification audit, where a new certificate valid for 3 years would be issued to your organization. So this is how it works. And the last thing which I wanted to highlight, which also Carl addressed in his part of this presentation today, is as of now, AI management systems are not so common in the organizations. So if you implement one now, it could be a very strong marketing benefit and also a strong signal to your users about your responsible and trustworthy brand. So if you have those resources and you especially if you operate in highly critical domains, that might be a very good idea to start thinking on implementing those systems, because this way or another, regulators catch up, and at some point you will have to catch up. So it's implement those systems anyways. So it's better to be more proactive and think upfront and basically get all the benefits from these compliance management systems before it becomes an obligation. That's it for me today. Here I just highlighted a couple of different other ISO standards which might be useful in your implementation journey. And that's it. Thank you for today.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Carl and Ms. Antonina, for your excellent and insightful shares. And I believe everyone now has a much clearer picture of how organizations can responsibly manage AI in a structured and measurable way. And we learned the AI management system enhances productivity by providing a framework for developing and deploying AI, while responsible AI principles ensure that these systems are ethical and fair, trustworthy. AIMS streamlines AI flow works, improve risk management, and ensures compliance, allowing organizations to innovate faster and more confidently. Responsible AI principles mitigate risk like bias and security, vulnerability, and building trust with stakeholders, which ultimately drives more successful and widespread AI adoption. Now let's open floor for discussion. So if you have any questions or comment, please share them in our chat box or use the Q&A features. Before that, let me raise some questions for two speakers, and feel free to provide your answer. If your questions are related to you, then please give us the brief answers. And I will give the 4 questions to you. And firstly, first question is like starting with a strategy, not just like a compliance. When you are first getting started with the ISO 42001, it asks us to think about the organizational context, things like external pressures, internal challenges, and what stakeholders actually care about. So here's the question: How can the leadership make sure that the setting AI objectives and defining the scope of the AI management system feels like a real strategic business decision rather than just ticking boxes for compliances.
I can address this one. As we discussed previously, like those AI management systems are not about only compliance. It's more about identifying what are the objectives in your organizations, what are the assets related to AI which you value the most, and those AI management systems allow you to protect those assets and then allow you to identify potential benefits for your organizations from AI, and then have a structured approach to maximize the opportunities and minimize the risks, and basically protect your reputation and assets which you value. So the practical approach would be to identify those assets and then prioritize accordingly.
Okay, thanks, Antonina, for your answer. Very excellent point. And second question is building real trust and credibility. Like ISO is about showing the world that AI systems are trustworthy, and with independent third-party assessment being part of the certification process. And how exactly does this translate into genuine reputation gains and stakeholder competencies? Especially like when we even seen all the headlines about AI gone wrong, such as Air Canada chatbot lawsuit, or those hiring algorithms that turning out to be discriminatory.
I can answer this one, and I think everyone knows that I like analogies now. A quick analogy here is, why do we all trust our lives with airplanes? We all board airplanes willingly today. And the reason why we do that is because before an airplane and an airline can operate an airplane in the market, they've got to meet minimum safety, quality, and operational standards. And so whilst these aren't requirements for AI yet, we believe we're confident that they will be. An ISO standard and being certified in the way that Antonina just described is a way of demonstrating that you are meeting prudent and vigilant management standards, minimum standards, right? And so I think the ability now to differentiate yourself in the market, I think is a huge one. But as I say, I think this will become a requirement for all operators of AI. So there's an opportunity to jump onto this early. But I'll give you a very specific example of how the standard might have even prevented the Air Canada case. And so Antonina touched on risk and impact assessment. Had the Air Canada team assessed the impact of potentially flawed advice, in their case it was incorrect policy advice about a fare, they might have identified the impact to their potential customers, tested their chatbot a little bit further, and ensured that hallucination was addressed before it was released. And so there's a lot of ways that the components of ISO 42001 are going to prevent harm, which is why we strongly advocate for it.
Okay, thanks so much for your answer, Mr. Carr. And my third question is like a bias problem. Like unwanted bias in AI can creep in from so many places, like societal assumptions. Well, how you collected your data and in engineering choices, and when it comes to the fairness metrics, like a demographic parties or equality of opportunity, and how does this actually help auditors and developers spot and fix biases, especially like since fairness itself can mean different things in different contexts?
I can take this one as well. Okay. So bias is an extremely complex question because it's not always so obvious. And that's why with bias, the approach would be similar to approach with quality or risk management. We have to implement the aspects and processes related to bias management in every aspect of our AI system lifecycle. So even when we start define our initial ML problem to solve, we have to take into account how we phrase it, because even on that stage, we can already introduce bias in the system. Then we have to take into account all the biases, obvious ones, which stem from data itself, because the data was gathered in our real world, which is also biased. So we have to take into account any societal, historical aspects which could introduce potential biases. And then every engineering step, decision-making throughout the system lifecycle also has to be looked at from the perspective of bias management. And then in the very end, you also have to assess how fair is your AI system. And as Mr. Dongjing highlighted for us, it is very important also to come up with some fairness metrics and assess how your system performs for different subgroups and different subpopulations of your end user, because in this way you might identify that for some specific subgroup of your users, your system may be underperforming or performing not as good as it does for other groups of your system. So in this way, you will be able to achieve better fairness and higher trust from all stakeholders.
Thank you so much for your answer, Ms. Antonina. And my last question is related with the regulations, like with the EU AI Act making a lot of waves in globally, and how does putting like ISO 42001's governance and risk management controls in place help you demonstrate compliance with this and other regulations that seem to be evolving almost weekly?
I'm happy to kick this one off. So I mentioned in the slides in my presentation that there's no such thing as a silver bullet or a panacea, but we are very confident that ISO 42001 is going to get you a long way there. And the reason why we say that, and the reason why we say that confidently, is because if you study all of the laws, regulations, guidelines, and standards, a good 80 to 90% of them are all attempting to achieve the same thing, right? So if you boil it all down, really, it's three main things. It's attempting to prevent harm. Two, they're upholding fundamental and basic human rights. And three, maintaining your society's ethical standards. And so if you think about that, and the OECD's AI principles, a lot of the laws and regulations and compliance requirements around the globe are all kind of centrally focused on these core principles. Now, I'll provide just a 5-point framework that summarizes what they're all looking at specifically. And the acronym that I use is DARTS. Okay, so it's DARTS. And this is a simplification, and Antonina has gone through some wonderful detail and nuance of the framework, but the simplification is data and data quality, accountability, risk management, transparency, and stakeholders. And if you think about those 5 areas, majority of laws and regulations are going to focus on these things. And so we think ISO 42001 really underpins all of those and is going to help you along with your compliance journey. It is important that I say it's not going to solve everything. We'll get you 80 to 90% of the way there, and you need to pay attention to your local market and product and use case nuances, of course.
All right, thanks very much for your clear explanation about my question. All right, thanks again, and thank you very much, Mr. Carr and Ms. Antonina, for your insightful and thought-provoking presentation and discussions. I believe you have, I bet you help us to understand not only why responsible AI governance is so crucial today, but also how ISO 42000 provides a practical roadmap for organizations to adopt AI safety ethically and effectively. From aligning AI with a strategic objective to managing risk, ensuring fairness, and embedding continuous improvement. Both of you have shown how this new standard can turn responsibility into real productivity advantage. As we have seen today, ISO 42001 isn't just another compliance framework. It is a management system for trust, helping organizations create sustainable value through AI that people rely on. And it is about making AI work for us, not just around us. So on behalf of the APO, I'd like to thank both of our distinguished speakers once again for your sharing expertise, and to all of you joining us from across the region for your attention and engagement. We hope today's discussion has given you a clear picture of how responsible AI management can drive productivity and innovation hand in hand. So please stay tuned for our upcoming productivity talks, and we have continued to explore the technologies and management approaches shaping the future of our work and competitiveness. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and stay productive and stay responsible, and see you at the next Bit Talk. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Antonina and Mr. Carl.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.